G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of the Purple Coloured Glasses. Today I'll be covering off Freo's performance in round 1 against Adelaide. Bit of a heart attack game, that one. And I'll also be looking at my round 1 tips, review, just touch on some of the points of things I've probably learnt in some of those games. I've watched most of them this week. So let's get into it. So start with Freo. I thought we'd got rid of the poor goal kicking, but apparently not. It was a bit of a heart attack game. I thought at half time we should have been at least 40 points up. There was quite a few easily kicked goals. Banfield shanked one out from about 15 metres out, and I went, oh, here we go again. I just knew Adelaide would come out, and boy, did they come out. And I actually thought we'd lost. I was pretty angry watching that end of the third quarter, start of the fourth quarter. It seemed like a lot of the free kicks were going against us. And the first couple of free kicks I saw, I was like, they're there. But then it felt like we just couldn't even touch the Adelaide blokes without a free kick getting paid. Once I calmed down on reflection, I think some of them were there. There was probably just a few we didn't get going back our way. But enough about the umpires. They got a tough job. Let's start from the first quarter. So I thought our mids really got on top. Brayshaw and Sarong were quite strong. I think Meek held his own against O'Brien, but I think O'Brien probably took the ruck over the course of the day. Rory Lobb presented really well. Walters found him with a couple of good kicks. Unfortunately, just couldn't convert again. I think Tracy looked a bit short of a gallop. Like he was a focal point that the Smalls could be around, but he didn't have a massive impact on the game. But that had sort of set us up in the start, is that Adelaide were just dreadful exiting defensive 50, and we were just intercepting at will, putting it back in, and just not converting our chances. Third quarter came along, and Adelaide's midfield just took it up a gear, and I'm not sure if our guys had put the cue on the rack or something, because the pressure had dropped right off. We couldn't get our hands on it, and then it felt like, to compound our poor accuracy, every time Adelaide took a shot at goal, it was going through. I'd like to have a look at the expected scores for this game, because I think it would actually be like a 30-40 point margin for Freo's way. We kick accurately, and they probably miss a few more than they probably did on the day. I thought Rochelle, really, really good debut, but it also highlights a bit of probably a gap in Freo's backline, is a small defender. Not sure exactly who was playing on him. I think it was Heath Chapman. So even though he had the hero moment at the end where he saved the game and he's got the points for Freo, if you're letting a guy kick 5 goals on you, it's probably a bit too many. I think Luke Ryan was a bit unsighted until that sort of last quarter. So whether it was him or Chapman, between Young as well, I don't think there was really anyone accountable for some of the Smalls running around for Adelaide. They got off the chain very easily. I thought Pearce and Cox really looked after their tools, Thilthorpe and Fogarty. Fogarty's a deadeye. Like, he got 2 marks and shots from pretty far out, and he nailed those opportunities. That's the sort of percentage play when you're defending. You want people to take marks out wide on angles. So I thought Fogarty just converted his limited chances quite well. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting game in terms of how I think some of the guys will come along. Some of the moves I think that worked towards the end of the game that helped get us back into. I thought Chapman and Young sort of lifted their output a bit. They were important in some contests. I thought Switkowski rotated through the middle a bit more, gave us a bit more legs. I think that would be a move Longmuir will pull a few times this year. When there was a couple of games back end of last year where they rotated Switkowski through the middle for a couple of stoppages, and he's very pacey. He wins a lot of one-on-one contests, and he seems to be able to just fake 3 handballs to no one and then stroll out of a contest. I saw him do that on the wing, and I was just impressed about how he was able to do that, and that set up a goal. I thought Schultz had a good game, very solid game for a small forward away from home, 3 goals. Some of the guys I thought that needed to probably lift their output a bit that I haven't touched on. I thought Walters didn't have a great game. He only had 9 touches. When he got the ball, he was good, but there were a lot of contests where he went in and he was easily knocked over. I just really fear for him because he's one of my favourite players, and I really hope this isn't like his last year. But if he sort of carries on the way he is, and he had a bit of a decline last year, let's be honest, he might struggle to stay in the team. There's not a lot of like small attacking players we've got. We've got Weston, who couldn't really hold down a spot last year, and you've got Travis Collier as well. But I think Banfield probably one to go out before Walters. Liam Henry, he had a couple of good moments, but then there was a lot of moments similar where, knocked off the ball, not strong enough in a contest. I think traditional whipping boy Blake Acres, I thought he actually had a solid game. I think when I looked at the AFL player rankings, he was third on the stat sheet. So very, very solid game from traditional whipping boy. And I think a lot of other people just had solid games. I think Will Brodie and Jordan Clark were quite good in their debut games. They weren't like amazing. I thought Jordan Clark was really good early and sort of faded out a little bit. And I thought Will Brodie was just a solid big body around the contest all day. Some of that probably just helps out Brayshaw and Sarong over the course of the year. So I might move on to the other games just to touch on how I thought they went and some observations from that. So the first game was Dogs against Melbourne, and Melbourne got up in this game. It went very similar to the grand final. I can't believe there is no one going anywhere near Petrarca after a grand final in a round one game where he's almost had 80 possessions and 3 goals or 4 goals or something. He's just on fire. It's like, Bevo, send someone to him. I know you want to, go midfield against midfield, but maybe you just need to put Libber on him or something. It's like, yeah, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result's the definition of insanity. I was a bit worried probably about Doggy's key position players as well. Like Norton, really good, but he was missing Bruce up there, I think, which I'd said leading into the game that Bruce will be a bit of an out. They don't have that sort of second option up forward. I thought Shaki had a terrible game. And then down back, I'm not sure they've got any sort of like gorilla key position defenders. Like they don't have a Wiedering or a Harris Andrews or Alex Pearce, or you can rattle off some key position defenders in the comp, and you're not really thinking about the Bulldogs in terms of having those real strong key defenders. So that ended up being the difference. There were a few momentum swings in this game, but Melbourne did look the more polished side coming into it. Carlton Richmond, so I tipped the Tigers in this, and they could have actually put a bit of a gap on at quarter time and almost iced the game. Thought Prestia going down was a big deal. And the more I look at Richmond's list, and I've tipped them to finish 4th, I think they'll struggle after that game, and now starting to look at their injury list, is that their midfield's actually quite thin. The game's in the balance. Dusty's nowhere to be seen. Looks like he's up around the forward line. You've got Cochin in and under, but there was no... It seemed like they were lacking the extra guys in the mid to try wrestle the momentum back. And Cripps looked really good for Carlton. I think he's going to benefit a lot from having guys like Chera and Hewitt around him to take a lot of the pressure off him. When Walsh gets back, they'll look really good. I thought Kennedy had a really good game. He was probably one of the best in their mid. And he was probably someone that's probably not expected to perform to that level. So if he can do that week in, week out, Carlton will be very dangerous. It's a bit of a hard game in terms of like how much do I actually take away from that. Like, Richmond just not as good as I thought they might be, in which case Carlton beating them is not that great. But in Carlton's perspective, this is a type of game they've lost most years. They've lost this first game 10 years in a row. So to break that hoodoo, to start off the season with a win, they take a bit of confidence out of that. So, it's only good for Carlton. The next game, Saints against Collingwood. I tipped Saints, and I really should have changed my tip when I saw Paddy Ryder was an out, and they just don't play very well when they don't have the Ryder-Marshall combo. Last year, I think most of their games where they perform well even against teams higher than them on the ladder is when they had that combo, and putting some of the midfielders up against each other from Collingwood against the Saints. The Pies mids really just got on top of this game, and their forwards looked a bit more dangerous and converted. It's interesting to see how Collingwood will go. I think they play Adelaide next. If they beat Adelaide, suddenly they're 2-0, and whether it's too early to sort of get hyped about Collingwood, maybe they'll go a bit better than people expect. Saints are probably like I wasn't surprised that Saints got beaten there. Like I didn't really know who to tip in this game, and I've just gone with the Saints, thinking with all the pressure that was on them last year, surely they'll come out this year. But that wasn't the case. The next game was Geelong against Essendon. I tipped Geelong to win by 30. They ended up winning by 66. They absolutely smashed Essendon. And this is more just on my assessment of the two teams. Like, I think Geelong's a hungry, mature midfield. Their possessions mean something. Where Bombers just seem like they're flicking the ball around, but like they're not going anywhere with it. Like, you look at the disposals, they've got more disposals, but like, what are these guys doing with it? It looks good on your fantasy team stats, but doesn't really contribute to winning a game of football. Nick Martin, I think it was, kicked 5 goals on debut. Not a bad effort. Tip my hat to that. The Sydney Derby. So I tipped the Giants and Sydney got up. It was a really good game. This might have been game of the round. It was sort of goal for goal. And then I thought just towards the end, GWS just sort of fell apart in terms of their forward entries and conversion. They had very similar scoring shots, and Sydney would just maintain the rage throughout the 4 quarters. I thought the midfielders were relatively well matched. I thought maybe guys like Kelly and Keneally sort of faded in and out of the game. And Sydney, amazing performance from Luke Parker. So I'm interested to see how Sydney will go next week. They're a team I've tipped to fall out of the 8. They may go a bit better than that. GWS I had outside the 8. I think the issue with them is sort of like their forward line. Like, they've had Finlayson go out. They've got Himmelberg up there, but he's not like a dominant type. Jesse Hogan was good in a couple of games he came in for last year as a sort of a point of difference, but he was injured. Brander kind of played a game that made you realise that's why West Coast traded him or let him go. He actually, they delisted him, I think, and then the Giants picked him up. So currently the Eagles are looking, fairly smart on that one, even though they've got a lot of outs at the moment. Lots of time to go though. That's only one game into the season. I'll give Brander that. The next game was Lions Port. I tipped the Lions to win by a lot. They ended up winning by a couple of goals. It was a very scrappy game. It was played with reasonably high pressure between, I think, two sides that sort of know they're both going to be around the mark this year, and they just didn't let each other play their game they wanted to play. I think Port had probably a few more outs than Brisbane that were significant to their structure, like Dixon. Their forward line didn't really look like they were going to put a cricket score on Brisbane at any stage, where Brisbane had their opportunities and just weren't very efficient in front of goal, and then they got over the line towards the end and just slowly worked them over. Not too big of a deal from Port Adelaide. I think the way they lost, it's not a ground or a fixture they typically do well in, away in Brisbane. And hopefully they'll bounce back at the Adelaide Oval next week. Then the Sunday game, so Hawks got over North. It was a pretty scrappy, low-skill game. It sort of played out the way you'd expect sort of two bottom sides to play. I think Hawks will probably finish better than bottom 2, but I think maybe they just played down a little bit to North's level. Then we've covered Adelaide, Freo already, and then West Coast versus Gold Coast. I tipped Gold Coast going into this game, and you're sort of like, Gold Coast, is there any chance you're going to win over in Perth? Now's your best chance. And they eventually did. I thought West Coast put up an amazing fight considering the number of outs they had for this game. They were winning for large portions of this game, mainly off their efficiency in front of goal. It was like every time they'd have a chance, it was going through the big sticks. And with a couple of guys coming back, and they're playing North Melbourne away. I know North beat them in Perth last year, but I think West Coast sort of got this siege mentality, backs against the wall, that, they want to stick it up some teams. So I think that'll be a good chance next week. They're showing a bit of heart and a bit of character, which was good. I think they just ran out of puff. It was sort of the difference between a Gold Coast team, which, there's been some knocks on their professionalism and how fit they are and stuff, but they've put together a pretty strong, they've had this group together for a few years now. They've got the traditional sort of AFL preseason every year. West Coast coming in a bit underdone. You got injured guys. You've got new guys coming in. You got one guy playing from the waffle. You would expect Gold Coast to eventually run over the top of them, which they did in that sort of the end of the third last quarter. And I think just a watch on West Coast is that sort of medium-sized defender. So with Brad Shepherd retiring, I think Rankin really got off the chain. I think he kicked 4 goals in the preseason. Frederick kicked 5 goals in a scratch match against them. So those types like Fritsch from Melbourne, those medium forward types against West Coast, I think will be dangerous. I think they've got good key backs for the extra tall guys with Barras, but I think that sort of that medium type will be challenging for them. Anyway, let me know what you think about my assessment of round 1, particularly the heart stopper. That was the Freo game. If you're enjoying the videos, drop me a like, a comment, and hit that subscribe button. Thanks, everyone. See you later.